Hello, and welcome to the SAF Magazine podcast. I'm your host, Anna Simet, and today I'm here with Steve Csonka, Executive Director at the Commercial Aviation Alternative Fuels Initiative, also known as CAAFI. Steve, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Anna. Happy to be here with you.
I think let's start today by having you tell our listeners a little about CAAFI, its goals, and members.
Sure. So CAAFI is a public-private partnership between the aviation industry and the federal government. We were formed in 2006 to focus on the development of sustainable fuels for the industry because we recognized that far back that in order to improve aviation sustainability with respect to greenhouse gases, that we needed to focus on the energy side of things, or our jet fuel. We've got a really simple remit from our sponsors, which is to foster the development and commercialization of sustainable aviation fuel. And we do that in a lot of ways, primarily through the public-private partnership with the government, but we also use different kinds of government funding mechanisms to enter into other public-private partnership activities to actually see work done on everything from research and development activities through demonstration and deployment. And through my work with my sponsor airlines, I also assist them with evaluating opportunities and even have been involved to the point of helping a producer and an airline come to an agreement on a fuel offtake agreement. So we have a very broad remit. We go deep in some areas, not so deep in others, but we cover the full spectrum of fundamental science through end use of jet fuel in an existing airplane. We have about, I think we're around 1,800 members worldwide. We don't charge for membership. All that we ask of our members is that they be focused on the same thing that we are, the development and commercialization of sustainable aviation fuel. And our current focus really happens to be in this intersection between the government and the government's commitments to the SAF Grand Challenge that we can talk about in a few minutes. And the fact that the government knows they're not going to be producing fuel, and so there's an entity needed to help close this gap between what the government does on an R&D and demonstration and deployment perspective and what happens on the industry side with respect to feedstock development, commercialization, and conversion into fuel. And so that's what's keeping us busy at the moment, is helping frame the structure for how industry and government work together on the Grand Challenge.
Very good. So, Steve, what does the U.S. SAF industry look like right now? What are the main drivers of investments and demand?
So, yeah, it's an interesting perspective. There's actually only one full-time SAF producer in the U.S. right now, and that often catches people off guard because we've been working on this a long time. You hear a lot in the public press. We occasionally, a couple of times in the last few weeks, have made the front page or the editorial in the New York Times, and so people see that there's things going on. And part of the blame for this mismatch between what we talk about and what's actually happening, that can be attributed back to folks like CAAFI. But what we're trying to do is set the stage for this very significant growth in actual fuel production that we expect to occur over the next 5-6 years, leading into the first goal of the Grand Challenge. So what I would say about the industry right now is that it is poised for significant improvements or increases in actual SAF production. And right now, through things that we have firm understanding of and understanding where these companies are going and where they're at in their development cycle, we're now looking at just a bit over 2 billion gallons of projected production by the end of 2028 from our level of production and import last year of only 16 million. So, orders of magnitude higher over the next 5 years. And we're busy working with all of those companies as they work on their supply chain development, actually start building their facilities, et cetera, and then looking downstream at what's it take to get those fuels to the end user customers. So on the verge, I think, is the way I would best describe what the status of SAF is at the moment.
Okay.
Main drivers in investment and demand, I think it really does come from the airlines' commitments themselves. Airlines have committed to net zero carbon by 2050, and several of them have made more aggressive commitments than that. Some of them have even made commitments for certain percentages of SAF by the 2030 timeframe. So it's definitely market pull. This is a scenario that's different from many other transitions that we've had in the US, perhaps. We have this clear market pull occurring, and that market pull transitions down to a lot of people wanting to understand what it means to work in this space. What does it mean to actually produce fuel? How can that fuel be produced? What feedstocks does it come from, et cetera? And then, it's being supported by favorable policy at present, with the blender's tax credit today, producer's tax credit starting in a couple of years, and several other pots of resources that have been made available for different application and research and development, demonstration and deployment. So all of those things are coming together. And they also came together in the establishment of the SAF Grand Challenge, which is the government's commitment to work with the aviation industry and the renewable fuels industry to stand up 3 billion gallons of production by 2030 and to fully replace jet fuel by 2050. So all of those things are coming together nicely into this comprehensive approach. But just because we have an approach doesn't mean that we're guaranteed success. There are still a lot of challenges in our future.
Right, which I think is a great segue into the next question. What would you say is the biggest near-term challenge, and what's the biggest long-term challenge in terms of meeting these set goals?
Yeah, I think there's one element primarily from which a lot of the other challenges derive, and that is it is cheaper to produce jet fuel from petroleum than it is to produce it from many of the processes that the industry has approved for the production of renewable fuels. So it's that fundamental challenge of petroleum jet fuel is cheaper. And so what we have are people working, utilizing policy support and all the mechanisms that are available to them to try to produce equivalently priced renewable fuel, or SAF, and that's a challenge. And even if there is the appropriate supporting policy, which there is in some cases today, those entities still have a bit of a challenge when they go to the capital markets to try to close out their financing. And they take a pro forma, and the pro forma shows that they need to, rely on policy support over the life of that loan. And that causes some challenges. So where we have a lot of people with production plans, the progress of moving from the plan to an actual authority to launch, it takes a little bit longer. It takes a lot more work, takes some cajoling, it takes getting progressive partners involved, et cetera. So that's the big near-term challenge. Longer-term challenge, I think, gets into the issues of the feedstocks that we're using today, which are primarily fats, oils, and greases. They don't scale. And so we have limited supply, and I won't argue about what the size of that supply is, but we need to look out to other forms of supply. And that's why we're interested in understanding how we can leverage the corn agricultural complex here in the US and move into other types of biomass resources, including purpose-grown crops, a whole range of waste streams, et cetera. So I think that's a big long-term challenge, is lining up all of the sources of biomass that might be available in that through the 2050 timeframe, and also assuring at the same time that we have technologies that can convert those biomass sources to SAF and deliver a price point that's acceptable to the airlines and their customers.
Great answer. So let's jump to now. The SAF industry has so many moving pieces. Things are moving quickly. You've said to me before, there are a lot of newsworthy things that don't always make the news. So can you give our listeners a general update on important or recent upcoming happenings on this space?
Yeah, and that's a really, really broad question because you can look at that with respect to technology, fuel qualification, feedstocks, et cetera. So, yes, and actually, moving at a lightning pace can be daunting, and the breadth of that wave can be daunting, but it also brings promise with it too, right? That we do continue to bring new technologies on board. We continue to make progress with respect to linking up feedstock suppliers and potential producers and expanding into some areas where we haven't in the past. So I'll give you a couple of examples of things behind the scenes. Just this week, we wrapped up the summer session of ASTM D02. That's the committee that oversees fuel. And D02J is the subcommittee that focuses on SAF or jet fuel first, SAF being a subset of that. But at this week's meeting, we've confirmed now that we've added an 8th pathway to the 7 that have been approved previously. We will also see an adjustment to the alcohol to jet pathway, adding in another approach to feedstock production for that process. We have, as an industry, approved another co-processing concept. We know that there are a couple folks who are working their way through that process who have also made progress and will likely see additional pathways being added to the total list over the next 18 months. And we'll also see, finally, it's been a while, we've been working on it a while, but the concept of getting to a fully formulated 100% SAF that doesn't need to be blended in the future, and different ways to get to that, so that we have the opportunity now to start reducing the impediment associated with having to blend SAF in with petroleum-based jet fuel to be able to use it in the industry. So it's not that that'll immediately be replaced. We'll still be doing blending for many years, but we'll also see new production concepts come online that won't need blending. And that's important because we've gotten pushback from the environmental community who says, hey, how can the aviation industry meet their sustainability goals and get to net zero greenhouse gases if they can only blend fuel at somewhere between 30 and 50%, right? And so we're removing that impediment. So it's things like that. And we continue to see commercial announcements. There was an announcement this morning out of Thailand that the Bangchak Group, for instance, is going to move forward with a SAF production facility there. And so, quite frankly, it's nearly every day, maybe not every day, but at least once a week, you hear of these additional commercialization activities taking place. Offtake agreements between producers, agreements between fuel producers and feedstock providers, et cetera. So it's just this continuous trickle of activities that continue to come in.
No doubt. And I think we've probably only scratched the surface with discussion topics. So I think it's only appropriate that we do a shameless plug for SAF Magazine's BBI International and CAAFI's upcoming North American SAF Conference and Expo. It's being held August 29th and 30th in Minneapolis. Do you have anything you want to add about the event, Steve?
Just to express my thanks to BBI for allowing us to join them in holding the SAF conference, the North American SAF conference. We do look forward to this being an annual event that moves CAAFI away from its biennial approach in the past, yeah, our industry is growing enough now to move this into a mainstream commercial event, replete with an expo that allows technology providers to get in the room face to face with producers and airlines and all understand one another better. So we're really looking forward to this inaugural show and looking forward into growing it into even something more significant in the future. And look forward to working with BBI on that. And we'll have communications going out to the CAAFI list this coming week with respect to more detail on that also.
Sounds great. I know we really look forward to it too. So with that, Steve, I really want to thank you for coming on the podcast, and I really look forward to having you on again in the near future to give some updates.
I'm happy to do that, Anna. And as significant things come, I'll be sure to point those out, and we can set up a schedule for making some of this more detailed information available to your subscribers and ours. Thanks.
Excellent. And to our listeners, thanks for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed this podcast. Until next time.